So today, we're going to have a talk from Conlin Durbin. Durbin's actually one of the names of my physics professors. I was wondering if you're related.
Probably, somehow. I don't know.
Is Durbin a common name?
Yeah, kinda. I don't know. Popular-ish.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be it.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, he's going to be talking about metalearning, which is learning about learning. So without further ado, pass it over to Conlin. Round of applause.
Thanks, guys. So yeah, my talk is on models, basics, which is an acronym that I made up, so that's going to be fun. And then how to learn to do everything, basically, which is kind of a polymath thing. So it's a little bit about me. If you want to follow me on Twitter, if you use Twitter, that's an amazing picture of me eating a Slim Jim that was taken in like super high quality, so I had to use it. I do development and design and a lot of other different things around here. What is metalearning? He said it's the process of learning about learning and how to learn. So why it matters. There are these things called circles of competency that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I'm going to show you some examples of first. So this is your typical person, right? So the outside circle is what they think they know, and then the inside circle is what they actually know. That's not a good thing. You don't want to think you know more than you actually know, but most people do. This is your ideal person. So if you talk, and ideals in quotes, this is the ideal person to a corporation that wants you to be just like one thing and get really, really good at that. So they want you to know exactly what you know and to have that circle be pretty big for that one topic. So if you're a developer, they want you to be really good at one language in programming. If you're an engineer, they want you to be really good at like mechanical engineering or something, and that's kind of what college teaches you. This is your typical jack of all trades, master of none. So they think they know a lot of stuff. They actually know very little about a lot of things. So that's not a good thing to be either. If anybody knows Robert Heinlein, which I think was mentioned in one of the earlier talks about like what a polymath is, he has the quote about specialization is for insects. He writes a lot about the competent man, which is just someone who's basically good at everything. They never have any flaws. And while that's not exactly feasible, it's at least you can work towards that. And so this is the polymath, and I had to change the words a little bit because it didn't quite fit. So that's the stuff that they want to know. They may not know all of it. This is the stuff that they do know, and this might be like not just 3 things. This might be 100 things, and they realize that there's an overlap in the things that they do know and the things that they want to know, and that's really, really important. So to explain why it's important, I'm going to give you a brief psychology lecture. So system 1 in the brain. This is in the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's a psychologist. It's a really good book. If you haven't read it, you should check it out. System 1 he talks about is your fast, automatic, frequent, emotional, stereotypic, the words that are up there, system of thinking. So this is, you're driving your car and you stop without even realizing it because the person in front of you slammed on their brakes. Right? It's your brain's pattern matching. It's the recognizing of changes in things and just automatically recognizing things. In comparison, you have system 2. And system 2 is the slow, effortful thinking, which is like, for most of us, learning to play chess is in system 2. So when you play chess, you really have to think about it. You have to think about what moves. Reading a book, lots of things. Something really interesting happens, though, when you get really good at something. So if you look at chess prodigies, which is what Kahneman talks about in the book, they move into system 1 when they're playing chess. They look at a board and they see patterns and they see automatically which move is the best move to play next. Even in these like random systems of things changing and getting complex, they know they can move things from system 2 to system 1, which is really kind of what you want to do. And so meta learning kind of talks about how to move things from system 2 and system 1, and that's going to be what kind of the rest of my presentation is about. So one really good way to do that is through mental models, not those kind of models. So if anybody knows who Charlie Munger is, he is the right-hand man to Warren Buffett, who's one of the richest men in the world, the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, which is one of the biggest investment firms. And he says about 80 or 90 important models carry about 90% of the freight in making you a worldly wise person. And so what that means is if you take a bunch of models from psychology and economics and physics and a ton of different areas, you can use them in applications to understand things. Warren Buffett's described him as having a 90-second mind, I think, or 60-second mind, where basically if you start talking to him and telling him an idea, within 60 seconds he will understand the basics of the idea and be able to talk to you at least somewhat competently about it. And the way that he does that is that he recognizes that everything is just a derivation of these 80 or 90 models. So to give you some examples, there's something called the availability heuristic. So this is a little bit interactive. Go ahead and read this. I don't want to read it all to you. And then I'm going to quiz you in just a second on which one you think. And answer like truthfully. If you've read Kahneman's book, you'll know this, and you might also just get it. But so everybody kind of read over it. Okay, sorry. All right, so if you've read it, how many people think that Steve is more likely to be a librarian? You would raise your hand if this description is one that you think fits a librarian more. So this description of a shy person, a little withdrawn, bookish, those words is a librarian. All right, no one's going to raise their hand, but
I did.
Okay, you did. That's good. That was the point. So you guys are all just smart, and it's not a not smart thing. But if you look at the statistics, the point here is that so it sounds kind of like a librarian when you're describing somebody. You think of like a little tiny person like in the library shuffling around handing out books. That's kind of what this sounds like. But there are actually like 20 times more farmers than there are librarians. So just statistically speaking, he's more likely to be a farmer, even with this personality. And the reason that people think that he's more likely to be a librarian over a farmer, even when the statistics don't show that, is because of the availability heuristic. So this is a psychological thing. It's been studied, I think, in the 70s. And basically, there's a lot that goes into it. But one of the most important things is that we tend to think that things that we can recall easier are more likely to happen. So in this case, when you're reading this description, you recall a librarian. That's what pops into your head. And because of that, you think it's more likely that he's a librarian instead of a farmer, when statistically, it's not. And so, you have a question?
Well, a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought he was a librarian because I didn't think a farmer would have a neighbor really close. I thought it was a riddle.
Oh.
Like by a neighbor. I was thinking farmers have a lot of land.
I gotcha.
So they wouldn't know him.
Yeah. Okay, no, you're good. That's all right. I can see that. That's a little confusing. I didn't describe it super well. But yeah, so that's the availability heuristic is a really interesting mental model. And it's more useful in recognizing when people have flaws in things. So if you're an investor, if you can look at somebody and say, well, no, what you think is your business model is based on this ease of recall. You think that this is a problem, but really statistically it's not. That's really useful in investment. It's useful in a lot of different things. You might there's a really interesting study kind of on this same thing. And there's a book called I don't remember the name of it. It's about mathematical thinking. And he talks about when in World War II there was a statistician that worked for the U.S. and when they sent back planes, they wanted to know where they needed to armor the planes that were getting shot. And so the generals were looking at the planes and going, well, there's bullet holes in the wings, and all these places we need to armor the wings. And the statistician looked at it and he said, well, no, we need to armor where the planes are not getting shot, because the ones that are coming back are not the ones that are getting fatally shot down. And so statistically, the more bullets you get in like the engine, the worse off you are. And so that's kind of an example of like an availability heuristic. You looked at it and you said, this is what I think because this is what I know, like things get shot here. And so all of your memory was on this thing getting shot in this one place, when really statistically, you should armor the parts where it's not shot. The next mental model is complex adaptive systems. So this one's a little shorter. You guys might have heard of these if you're in engineering or something. But this is used to describe bathrooms, traffic jams, and the stock market. So bathrooms, complex adaptive systems are systems that are complex and adaptive. So they change and they have multiple layers, basically. Complex means multiple layers, adaptive means that it changes. So in bathrooms, how many people have heard that the first stall is the cleanest stall in a bathroom? All right, so some people have heard that. They did some studies. I don't know why anyone would study that, but they proved that bathroom stalls, the first one, is more likely to be clean because nobody goes to that one. Like just psychologically, for some reason, nobody goes to that one. But then they put out that study, right? And so a bunch of people read about it, and so everybody starts using the first one, and it's no longer clean. So that the first layer of this complex thing is, well, the first one's clean, so everybody goes there. Then the second layer is, well, everybody's going there, so really like the second through maybe 4 are the more clean now because the first one's the one that everybody's using. And it just kind of keeps building on each other, right? So maybe you think about that, so now the first one's the cleanest, and then you think about that, so then it kind of keeps going back and forth, and like where do you decide? Traffic jams are the same way. You can kind of think about it. If there's a traffic jam going into a city, and we imagine that it only has 2 roads, and one road is traffic jammed, everybody's going to go to the second road, and suddenly you have this complex system where you have to decide which road is the one that's going to be less congested based on what everybody else is thinking. And so a good example of what you should decide in that case is like, if the news report is reporting that everybody should take the detour, you actually might be better off to not take the detour because everybody's going to be going there listening to what the news is saying. And with the stock market, you can kind of think of the same thing. It's a question of like, why does Exxon's stock and Apple's stock fall and rise similarly? They're in 2 completely different industries. You can make the point that Exxon and oil and petroleum makes like plastic and Apple uses plastic, but let's just use that as like, Exxon and Apple, 2 completely different industries, oil, computers. So why do they rise and fall together? And it's because when investors look at stocks, they don't think of them as systems, they look at them as like, Exxon is falling, that means that something is going wrong in the economy, and so they think like multiple levels ahead, and suddenly they arrive at, well, I should sell my Apple stock because it's falling. And so that's how that's kind of useful in the real world. Another mental model is game theory. So this just kind of give some overarching, high-level topics on mental models. If you've heard of the prisoner's dilemma, it's the classic game theory thing where you put 2 prisoners in a room, you give them each ultimatums, and they'll basically decide the one that's pretty much the worst for both of them. They'll admit to a crime. You can look it up if you don't know what that's about. But basically, game theory is how do individuals interact within what you would call a game, and that's an economic principle. And so it's a good example of why mutually assured destruction works. And this is actually kind of a complex adaptive system too, because if you think about it, if the US launches nukes, then Russia launches nukes, then the US defends against those, and it kind of that becomes a complex thing. But it's also, if you think about it in game theory, the US has a negative payoff from launching nukes because they're going to get nukes launched back at them, so the only positive payoff is to not launch nukes, even if you're going to war, which is why mutually assured destruction is a thing. And then so circles of competency are what I talked about earlier. It's the idea here is just to know more than you think you do. And so that's, I think, a good thing to talk about when you're talking about polymathy. You can be pretty sure that you're pretty smart, but it's always a good idea to actually know more than you think you know, right? Because in that case, you're going to surprise yourself and not be surprised when you don't know something. So moving on, this is the awesome acronym that I made. So BASIC, this is my little comic about acronyms. So this is just a framework for learning new skills. So the B stands for break it down. And so, as you can see, I have a guitar up here. I'm going to show someone in a minute how to use this to play guitar. And so basically with playing guitar, you want to break it down. So to learn to play the basics of guitar, you need to know chords, get it in tune, learn timing, and build calluses, right? Because you don't want your hands to hurt. Then you want to make those into actions. So get in tune is kind of an action, but learning what the guitar string names are and then using a tuner are way more action based than knowing chords. Determining the purpose of why you're playing. If you want to be a classical guitarist, you probably should start somewhere differently than if you just want to be able to play a few songs with friends around a campfire. Then actually learning the chords. And then learning timing. So a good step here is to learn to play along with songs and also to pick out rhythms from songs. Then simplify it. So in this case, we're just going to turn each of those action steps into something really easy to get used to. So learning guitar strings, there's your basic tuning, E, A, D, G, B, E. Using a tuner is already super simple. You just hook your guitar into it and it tells you if you're playing the right chord. So you hit the first string, and if it's not an E, you turn the thing until it says it's an E. And if it's not an A, D, G, B, E, same deal. So then determining your purpose. And so for, I think, a lot of people, playing guitar, the purpose is just to kind of have fun and play with friends and just enjoy making music. And so learning chords. How many people have heard that you only need 4 chords to play like most songs in the world? Okay, so I'm going to get into music theory a little bit about why that's true in a second. But there's a YouTube band called Axis of Awesome that plays a song about like how G, C, E minor, and D are the only chords you ever need to learn to play any song you ever want to play, pretty much. So the playing along with songs, if you just put headphones on, plug in your guitar, and then just rock out, you'll learn to get timings down. So timing is more like your down, up, how you're going to strum the guitar to make it sound like the way that it does in the song, which changes. And then picking out rhythms from songs is the same idea, but if you're in the car and you're just like, sitting around listening to music, you can start trying to pick out when chord changes are, and then how the strumming works. And so to get into chord progressions, the 3 chords that you need are 1, 4, and 5. This is a good link, just Wikipedia chord progressions. It talks about the science a little bit more in depth, but to kind of give a demonstration. So 1 in a C major scale is a C, 4 is an F, and 5 is a G. And so you'll find a lot of songs that have that chord progression in them. And then if you look, this is all the different keys. And so right here, most songs are in the key of G, so G, C, and D. And then you throw in an extra E minor, which becomes 1, 4, 6, little 6, and 5, because E minor is on a minor scale. But that's all sciencey and mathy, and we don't need to know that. And now you have just a ton of songs that you can play with those 4 simple chords. So the second to last thing is iterate it. So some new psychology has come out, and this kind of makes sense if you know anything about brains and the way that they work. If you're going to learn a new skill, you should change the way that you do it every time, because your brain forms different pathways each time you learn something new. And so if you're just going to pick up a guitar and just play G, C, E minor, D over and over and over again, it's not going to get any better at that. So you need to switch the way that you're doing songs. And so that's what I just said. And then finally, I recommend keeping track, because you'll start to realize that skills build on other skills, which is kind of what the polymath slide of the circle and competencies that I talked about earlier. So in this case, a dependent skill, this might be like what your log looks like, right? A dependent skill would be playing in a rock band. You need to be able to play guitar to be able to play in a rock band. And so you can kind of keep keeping track of the things that you have, that you want to learn to do, that this helps with. There's really not any prerequisite skills. I guess you could make the argument that some of the things I talked about earlier are, but the codependent skills, like playing ukulele, it's very, very similar to learning to play the guitar. So I think, all right, I can teach both of you actually. No, you good?
Sure.
Okay. All right, cool. Have you ever played guitar before?
Once.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good. So, actually, I have one thing first. Sorry, I forgot about this. If you want to sit down for just a second. Just to prove to you guys, if you haven't heard the Axis of Awesome song on YouTube, I put together a basic version of that. So, now granted, I've been playing guitar for a lot longer than 10 minutes, but hopefully I can teach someone to do similar to something. So this is just a bunch of different songs that only use those 4 chords that I was just talking about. So I'm gonna start. Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of that test and don't ask why. Not a question, but a lesson learned in time. Something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher. And it burns, burns, burns. That ring of fire, that ring of fire. But I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours. Love of mine, someday you will die, but I'll be close behind. I'll follow you into the dark. lie when it's burning low. Only miss the chord song when it starts to slow. Only know you love her when you let her go. Only know you can high when you're feeling low. Only hit the road when you're missing home. Only know you love her when you let her go. And you let her go. So there you go. That's like a bunch of different songs and a bunch of different genres, all using just those 4 chords. All right, now my volunteer.
Okay.
All right, so play guitar one time. From around here. Go ahead and hold on to that, and you can just put the strap on. So, if we recall
Okay.
our 4 chords, there we go. Okay, so this is in tune already. I already did that because that would have been a really boring thing of me just sitting up here like playing one string until it was in the right place. So the 4 chords that you need to learn are G, C, E minor, and D. So I'm going to teach you a little bit of a modified version of a couple of those.
Okay.
So this is the 3rd fret,
Mhm.
2nd fret, and then these 2 fingers are going to be on the 3rd fret there. You see what?
Okay.
Okay.
So like,
So one there, and then those 2. And you can just put one if you want on the last string.
on the last one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so just strum that. Yeah, so there you go. It's a little, my guitar's a little out of tune, I think, but it's all right. So that's a G. So remember that. Yep. Now keep it in that position, and I'll just show you from here. Go ahead and drop these 2 fingers down. Yeah, just right there, and play that. So that's a C.
Really?
Yep. Pretty close anyway. It's a modified C, but it's close enough.
I did it. Okay.
And then these 2 right here. So just push down on those 2 strings.
I don't know, my finger.
You can use 2 fingers if you would like.
Thank you.
Yep. And now just strum that. That's an E minor.
That one's nice.
Yeah, that's good. And then, oh man, this one's a little. So here, here, and here. And that's a D. Okay. So can you play those all in a line?
How fast?
Just as fast as you can go, whatever you want to do. So 1. So that one goes here.
Like
There you
that?
go. Yep.
Okay.
G. Drop it down. C.
I don't remember this one.
2 fingers here.
Oh, right.
Yeah, D. So there you go. She just learned the 4 chords that I just played for that one thing. So, and then the next step was the playing along with songs, but I can just teach you. So there's down, up, right? So if you put your hand into a G,
I don't remember which one that is.
That's-
Help me out. Okay.
okay? So now just strum that. So that's just down. You can keep going down for a minute. Yeah. So there you
Do
go.
you use your thumb?
Yeah, you can use whatever. I use these fingers, like these 2, and like brush it. But you can also use your thumb. So there you go. That's a G. So if you just keep doing that, there you go. So now, drop it to a C, and see if you can go from a G to a C.
That sounds the same.
Yeah, they're similar chords, but then E minor, down 1. So yeah, there you go. And then D. So that's yeah. So that's like almost every song you could ever want to play on guitar. And to show you guys something kind of cool, you can stand if you'd like. Put that down. Yeah, you can go sit down. That's cool. So if you want to learn to play guitar, I highly recommend Ultimate Guitar to learn to play chords. So the reason that I recommend this, and I'm going to show you something kind of cool. So if you look at that song that I showed you, Let Her Go, by Passenger. So if you click on here and you look at it, and you're like, these are not the chords that he showed me. This is F, C, G, and A minor, right? So if we go back to this slide though, I think this is going to be like a key of C kind of thing that this is in right now. But what's cool is if we just click this little button here and we go down 5, It's C, G, D, and E minor. It's the song you just learned. And what's funny is if you have a capo, you can do this and you can literally play any song you want pretty much, because you just figure out how many of these you do and you put a capo on that fret and you can play the song. So that's pretty much the presentation. Are there any questions or anything?
Round of applause before questions.